What we mainly see, it has a lot to do with communication or lack of communication. When you can sit into an owner's meeting and all there is just finger pointing back and forth, well, there's no trust between the team and there's a lack of communication. And so I think that's a big piece when we come in, is to truly get everybody sat down, understanding the roles, responsibilities, who's been doing what. Let's find out and let's kind of get everyone communicating. That's one of the biggest things, is just the lack of communication when we come into projects, whether they've already started or kind of late to the game, is to figure those things out.
Hello and welcome to The Clear Voice, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. I'm your host, James Groom. Joining me on today's episode is Clear Career President Michael Boese. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, James. It's a great time of year, and especially when you're in Texas. The months of March and April and some of May are probably our best months. We are really excited to be having some good weather.
Yeah, it doesn't take long to go from wintertime to summertime here.
Yeah. Those of us who are not originally from Texas have learned to live with it. I think a couple of our guests, I know at least one probably isn't originally from here, so it'll be interesting to hear their story.
Well, Michael, today we're going to talk about an important topic for city managers and city executives in general. When you were serving as a city manager, amongst all the other things that caused you a lot of stress, how nerve-wracking was it to have a multi-million-dollar municipal capital project going on that you were ultimately responsible for?
I think there's a lot of stress that goes on city leaders, not just the city manager, but those elected officials and mayors, and whether you're talking school boards or superintendents. When you have those large projects where there's a huge capital investment from the taxpayers going in, it's one of the things that you're always mentally focused on. You're spending a lot of mental energy on that. And the problem that I saw as I was serving as a city manager was I'm not an expert in construction. I can go out and I can look at a building going up and I might be able to see certain things, but certainly I don't know the intricacies of how those things go together. The other thing that I ran into is it's difficult to find people that you trust. You'd like to think that everybody from the architect to the builder is always looking out for your best interest, but there's also some times where profit motive may come into play. There's different occasions where it's really important to be able to leverage the people who you can trust to make sure that the city or the school district's getting the biggest bang out of their buck. The guests we have on today are really important to me. As I was transitioning out of city management and starting Clear, I connected with a company that I just was really passionate about. I thought that they were representing cities kind of in this construction area from the project management side, and really loved working with them, connecting them with municipalities and school districts. And it was just such a great synergy. I had a project in Wimberley that I was working on when I was there, and this company came in, and they weren't officially hired, but certainly provided advice. And that's something that we really enjoyed, having a trusted friend to kind of look out and talk about all the things that are going on. So really excited to have these folks on today, James.
This is one of those topics where, as a city, the decision makers can do everything right, and they can still end up behind schedule, over budget, and answering tough questions from their community.
It's something that always happens. And when the schedule goes wrong, or God forbid, the change order comes in, trying to figure out where do we find the extra money, who's responsible for the change order, also trying to figure out why was this not planned for. And those are all kind of things that are impacting, municipalities. And subsequently, we talk a lot about this with the end user. What do the citizens experience in the community? And naturally, you're putting in these buildings or these large projects so that the citizens have a higher level of service and engagement in their community. So when they're delayed, it's not just a construction issue. It's much more of a community issue in the sense that the city and the citizens aren't able to do the things that they were planning on doing.
Joining us today to talk about this important topic is Marty Schmidt. He is the president and CEO of AGCM. He has more than 2 decades of experience leading complex municipal and infrastructure programs. And Kendra Hickman, she's the director of operations for AGCM South Texas region, overseeing large-scale public sector projects from planning through completion. Marty and Kendra, welcome to The Clear Voice.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Yep. Pleasure to be here.
Marty and Kendra, before we get into the projects themselves, I want to talk about both of you as leaders. At the end of the day, cities aren't just hiring someone to manage a project. They're trusting people to help guide something that's going to impact their communities for years. Marty, from your seat as a CEO, how do you view your role when working with a city? What are you really there to do?
I think from a leadership perspective, our biggest role is to be their trusted advisor. When we talk about what the value is that AGCM or an owner's rep firm can bring to the cities, it's really about being the trusted advisor. We're in a people business. We're all people, and relationships and the vulnerability that we can create truly brings that trust. And so the trust and transparency, I think, is vital to what I'm able to bring for our team, and then obviously to our clients that we have.
And Kendra, from an operations side, you're in the middle of a lot of moving parts. How do you lead through that when things get complicated or start to shift?
That's the sweet spot, right? You want to make sure that you're leading with transparency, just like Marty alluded to, but it's all about being proactive and really keeping your eye on the ball. I find that if you're able to align the end goal and what success really looks like for your client or municipality as a whole, then you're really able to meet the expectation because you're able to have that foresight on what it takes to get you there.
Marty, you guys are talking about projects that are multi-million dollars most of the time. How do you build trust early with a city manager and council to make sure they know that you are working for them and you don't have any other interest?
Sure. I think there's a few things. One, down to the fact of just building relationships. We could easily go in there and we could respond to an RFQ, a request for qualifications. And sure, our qualifications would maybe get us to the interview process. But if we don't have a relationship and if they don't understand what we do, we're kind of behind the eight ball. So it's truly about building those relationships up front. Talking about just, being there for the city's best interest is also kind of how some of the fee structures are put together. We are solely representing those clients and those cities and those owners by our fee structure. What I mean by that is we are truly transparent on how we're providing our fee proposal. So let's say that maybe a contractor comes in and there's a $100,000 increase on the contract. Well, most professional services, their fee would just escalate with that change order. With us, we have a very unbiased position where our fee is set and we're there to deliver a product, right? More of a deliverable. And so I think that also brings that trust because we are there as an unbiased opinion and advice person to give. So I think that's where a lot of that trust comes into and kind of building that relationship with the people that we're working with.
Unfortunately, when those change orders come in, sometimes they are necessary. And I guess if you have no financial interest in approving them, then the city should be able to sleep well at night knowing if that's your recommendation, then it was done because it had to be done. Kendra, have there been moments when you've been working with cities and, you sit between the city and these contractors where you had to employ some leadership techniques to get through some tough decisions?
Absolutely. I think as a leader in those scenarios, especially when you sometimes have so many stakeholders, the municipality, the community, the contractors, the design team, you really have to lean on your morals, right? So if we're talking about transparency and building trust, that really starts with being genuine and fair to the project. So no matter what side of the fence you're looking at, if you're evaluating a change in design or in construction or anything of the sorts, when you're having to make those tough decisions, you really have to analyze it with your client in mind, so with the municipality in mind, but also make sure you're fair across the board. So just because one side of the fence might be fighting really hard doesn't make it fair, right, or just. And so truly employing that side of your brain to think about not only builds the team and builds the trust amongst the team, but also it tends to do right by your client.
Marty, before we started recording, Mike said that you guys have like a leadership program with AGCM. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we have a leadership development program. It's a yearly program that we have anywhere between 6 to 8 people go through. It's not an invite only. We send out a bunch of questions and we want to have people, so you have to apply to it. And so we want to make sure we put the right people into it because it could be anywhere between a 4 to 5 month program. It's a pretty intense program, but ultimately it's trying to develop the leader in yourself personally and professionally. And so to me, leadership is not just what you do at work, but it's also what you can do at the house or what you can do in your community. And so we try to teach that leadership professionally and personally in this course that we have.
I'm certainly glad when companies have continuing education that's outside of those technical aspects because your job is very technical as well. But there's obviously a lot more to life than just how to do something in a technical sense.
Yeah, for sure.
You guys would be called an owner's rep. Is that what the colloquial term would be?
Yeah, it's what we like to go by. When you start saying project management firms, it can get confusing. The word project management can be in IT, project management can be industrial, project management can mean a lot of things. When we say we truly represent the owner, that's what it's about. It's owner's representation is our service, professional service.
Well, what would you say makes a municipal capital project different than private sector work?
I think the main difference would be the procurement methods. With a public entity, there's procurement laws. At least in Texas, we have procurement laws that we have to follow. In a private sector or a private project, sometimes you don't have to follow those procurement laws. And so that's where it makes it very different, but also more challenging in the public sector because you are following the rules, you are following the laws. And so where we have to drive that and being, one of the things that we come against a lot is being the owner's rep is that we have to ensure those laws are being followed. And so that's even when an RFQ goes out or an RFP goes out, there's a blackout period. Well, no one's supposed to talk to anybody. And so being the owner's rep, we're trying to ensure that those conversations and things are not happening. There's a lot of differences between the public and the private sector. Private sector, you have a lot more flexibility. And then obviously in the public sector, it's a bit more rigid, but I think that's what also makes it challenging is because we got to make sure we stay within those guardrails.
Well, and Kendra, I'm sure you guys pay attention to what goes on, even if you're not working on a project, you pay attention to that space. Do you sometimes find cities underestimate the complexity of these projects and try to take them on themselves?
Absolutely. We all like to think that we can do 50 jobs at once, right? But the fact of the matter is that oftentimes municipalities or any clients in general just might not have the bandwidth. And it's not for lack of trying, it's just the reality of the world. You have a day job a lot of times, in this case, helping a city run smoothly. And so when we look at projects that we're not working on, oftentimes I know I and fellow AGCM folks, we always feel like, oh gosh, I wish we could help. I wish we could really get in there and help them. We'll see a project standing still sometimes. And I always wonder what and how they got there. And the answer oftentimes is nobody's really there to drive the bus and act as that conduit for communication flow and things that can really be identified proactively early in the process. So all the time we see it, all the time we run into it. It's one of the challenges of being an owner's rep because it's not a new industry. It's not a new sector of the market, but it's still in some ways unknown. I deal with it in South Texas often, right? So if we're not talking about it, some people don't even know it's an option to have an owner's representative, let alone know what one would do for them.
I hear the word or the term value or adds value when we're talking about owner's reps all the time. Can you guys tell me what that actually means? Are you talking about cost savings, speed, trust, outcomes, or all of the above?
I'll go first, Kendra, I guess. To me, it's all the above. Back to the people aspect. I mean, the value that we bring is the trust and transparency with the people. There's lots of different value add, but I think when it really comes down to the end of the day, we play the most critical role. We have the architect engineer that's designs. You have the contractor who builds, and then you've got the owner's rep who solely represents the city's interest. And so there's not many that play in kind of our area there, right? And so that's when we bring the value and we talk about the value, it's really that value. It's that unbiased advice that we're able to provide you. And then, of course, there's the cost protection. If we have the opportunity to come on board early, we're able to review the budgets and ensure that that's what's going on in the market, in the industry, in that local sector. So we're able to provide advice on that. When you think about schedule, we have a lot of experienced professionals, previous and past contractors that understand scheduling and how to read scheduling and being able to look at successors, predecessors, and the critical path. Getting ahead, a lot of these public projects, there's managing the utilities. We either got to get utilities underground or we got to get them overhead or we got to completely move them. And when you're thinking about in Texas, there's a lot of underground pipelines that you have to deal with. And so, navigating that or the railroad system, they don't just move railroads for you to build something. And so being able to navigate those things, permitting, long lead items, the scheduling is a big piece of our value as well. And then I think, just back to our fee, it's not tied to the construction cost. So our advice is unbiased. And I think that's a huge value to the clients as well. Kendra, I don't know if I missed anything.
I think you kind of hit on it, but the added value is not necessarily always a glamorous thing, but it's really and truly being the conduit for the flow of information. Because if you have a smooth flow of information from design and into your project completion, it's going to change the game, right? It's going to ensure that things are moving. It's going to ensure that things are moving fairly justly, and offering that unbiased advice along the way really helps mold a project into that end success that I mentioned earlier.
What made me think of that, what you brought up, Kendra, if it's seamless and it's almost like invisible, our service, I think that's great, because that means everything's going well. The project's running well. You're not having to go talk to council about a crazy change order or some kind of schedule delay. So I think that's a good point. I think the true value is, if as an owner's rep, if we're not seen or known to be there, that's where our value truly is.
Yeah. And also, I think something that was kind of eye-opening for me as I was working with AGCM coming out of the city environment was the ability for you guys to kind of look at agreements and contracts from a contractor perspective. There's great city attorneys, and naturally, many of them have worked on contracts, but from a very legal perspective. But to really get in there and kind of look at the agreements before anything's even signed, to say, hey, here's the construction perspective, and really what the architect or contractor are asking you to do as far as the boots on the ground that are doing the project, I think is really, really helpful for cities.
I think one of the things from looking at government in general, and it may be in private sector as well, sometimes we look at the bottom dollar and we go, this is going to cost us X. But if we do it this other way, it doesn't cost us anything. But they forget, if you're going to build a police station, well, your police chief, some of their command staff, and maybe some officers are going to have to oversee that. And there's a hard cost in that as well. And imagine if something slips through the cracks that they should be doing on their police job because they're having to concentrate on this building, or vice versa, something slips through the building because they're trying to do more work with the same amount of time that they have. When we look at projects, sometimes we have to look at what makes up that bottom dollar, what other costs that we would have that we're not thinking about. Marty and Kendra, what would you say are the biggest misconceptions that municipalities have about owners' reps?
I'll take this one. I'll start it, Marty. I think a big misconception, or maybe just unknown, is what it is and what an owner's rep does. A lot of times we'll even be well into a project, years into a project sometimes, and we have to give a refresh because a question comes up and they're like, well, what's your owner's rep role in this? So it's really getting clients to understand that we don't design it and we don't build it. We're really just an extension of their entity. We oftentimes get mistaked for working directly for them. Sometimes people don't even recognize the AGCM name because we're just a part of the team. And so it's getting them to understand our actual responsibilities contractually and how we're impacting the other contract administration. So while we might not be in charge and directly responsible for a schedule, for example, we are responsible for addressing items in the schedule, tracking the schedule, making sure it makes sense logically and that it's understood and that ultimately it aligns with the move-in date, right? So we are constantly going back and reviewing it and sort of raising the flag up if there's a misnomer there or something that's not aligning. So similar with budget and quality, right? So they have to understand that, no, we're not swinging a hammer on the job site, but we are making sure that what's going in on the job site oftentimes aligns with what's designed, right? So what the municipality might be paying for is actually getting installed in the field as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. The only thing I could think of from a misconception possibly is, why do I need to pay another professional service fee for something that you're going to do that my contractor already does or my architect already does? To Kendra's point, it's all about education. We're still educating clients. We're still educating. So I think the big misconception is that we're not an architect. We're not a contractor. We have different services. We provide a different service to the clients. And I think that's a big piece. To your point earlier, James, about the burnout, with staff, and we see this a lot through independent school districts as well in the public sector. ISDs are there to educate our students, educate our kids. Hiring an owner's rep to help them manage a construction bond that may have 5 years, that makes a lot of sense, right? You're not burning out the principal who's trying to manage something, or you're not burning out the superintendent who's trying to manage, or the CFO. It gives those entities the opportunity to to focus on what their day job is, not burn them out. Like you talked about the officers in the police station example. It's in all cases. And I think that's part of the misconception is making sure that they're educated and understand what we do as well as how we can help them. And we're not burning out staff because we're taking that burden off of them. And then like you talked about again is the bottom line. There is a cost to having a day job and then also be worrying about other stuff in the background or after hours or early hours when construction starts. So again, there is a cost savings there too when you solely rely on an owner's rep firm to do your job for you.
When we talk about this, what size city or school district are we talking about? Are we talking about only small cities, mid-sized cities, or even some large cities? Do you guys do work with all these size clients, or do you find yourself working for one or the other?
No, it's all sizes. To pick on Mike, I mean, the city of Wimberley is not a very large city, but that's a city we have a great relationship with. We're still working at City of Wimberley, all the way to Kendra's, is managing and leading the effort at the city of Corpus Christi, which is, 300,000 plus population. We have contracts with city of San Antonio, city of Houston, which are larger, multi-million population cities. So there's really no city too small or too large, and down to the public sector is, independent school districts. It's the same way. Our service, if could be explained and understood and the value is seen, it really doesn't matter if it's a small district or a large district. So the value is still there.
Is it fair to say that most government entities don't have a lot of people with a lot of extra bandwidth sitting around trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives? So like they already have a full-time job. They don't need additional responsibilities.
Yep.
Do you guys have any project stories where owner's representation clearly changed the outcome, and what would have happened if you guys hadn't been there?
I have one. It's not a particular example, but I think it happens quite often. Our goal is to be able to get in early with the projects and to help them in the very early stages of procurement. And so when a city or an entity is starting to think about an RFP or an RFQ, request for proposal or request for qualifications, they're asking for two very different things. And it's help educating the clients of what they're looking for. There's a lot of cases that we were able to be brought in early on. Typically, when you send out an RFP, when a city receives the bids, they're just going to look at the lowest cost. What's going to be the lowest cost that I can get for within my budget? At the end of the day, sometimes the lowest cost is not the best value or the best quality. You may end up with a lot of change orders. You may end up with maybe some defaults in the construction or something else if you're not going to go with a higher quality entity. A lot of the projects or the lessons learned to RELAW is making sure that there's grading criteria in an RFP, because you're allowed to do that. You can have grading criteria in an RFP that's not just based off of the price. You can have a quality section there. You can have a scheduling section or a safety section. So your whole criteria is not 100% based off of the price. And so that's not one particular example, but we've seen that over multiple projects, being able to get in early on to at least to advise the owners of what's a better process to go with.
Well, and Kendra, from an operation standpoint, what's that one item that always shows up in construction, whether you guys are in there or not, that costs the city money that, obviously you guys will catch it and the city hopefully will?
One item. Gosh, that's a big request for one. Honestly, I think from my point of view, my mind immediately goes to the beginning of a project. Marty talked about procurement, but my mind actually goes to aligning stakeholder needs, because oftentimes the cost of change increases exponentially the further you get into a project. And so bringing in all of the end users of the project, the community, the police example is a great example. There's often so many end users of a project, and they might all have different expectations, different needs, and different wants. And bringing them in and aligning them happens almost every project it's every project I've ever been a part of. Whether we start early and can get a handle on it or not really affects the end result of the project. But aligning all of those end users, defining what success looks like from that coordination, and bringing that through to the rest of the construction project, right? Eye on that ball to ensure that it goes smoothly. Because oftentimes when that doesn't happen, which is the nature of construction, when you're dealing with sometimes 5, 10, 30 stakeholders at a time on one project, things get lost in translation, things get forgotten, and that's just the nature of it, of how it goes, because projects can go for a very long duration and positions change and people's change and needs change, but making sure that those are transitioned into the project successfully through design and construction ultimately is the biggest challenge on a project, I would say, and it's the biggest place that I feel that we can have an impact.
Yeah. And also, Kendra, you guys can help cities with facilities condition assessment. So if I'm sitting there and I have a building where I'm not really sure what I need, or I'm not even sure if that building has a much longer life left, is that something that city or school district can reach out to you guys and go, hey, can you guys just come in and take a look at this and kind of give us maybe a high level plan of where we go from here?
Absolutely. That's an exciting time to be in, right? Because if you can utilize and understand your existing facilities, then you have a leg up on what your next steps might be.
Marty, when we're talking about you guys coming in and taking over a project that's had problems, what's more common? Is it one major thing that's been a problem, or is it like death by 1,000 cuts and there's all these things that went wrong?
I think both. But what we mainly see, it has a lot to do with communication or lack of communication. When you can sit into an owner's meeting and all there is just finger pointing back and forth, well, there's no trust between the team and there's a lack of communication. And so I think that's a big piece when we come in, is to truly get everybody sat down, understanding the roles, responsibilities, who's been doing what. Let's find out and let's kind of get everyone communicating. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is just the lack of communication when we come into projects, whether they've already started or kind of late to the game, is to figure those things out. Because at the end of the day, if everybody's communicating, the architect is going to see things and know things that need to be brought up. The contractor is going to see and know things that need to be brought up. And as the end user, they're definitely going to know things that they want and needs and desires that they have. But if the three of them are not communicating, the schedule's worthless. And so I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of communication when we get into the game late.
I agree. I'll just add that that truly is the genesis. You said, is it one big thing or death by 1,000 cuts? I think death by 1,000 cuts happens because of poor communication habits in the project delivery team. So it makes all the difference in the world, because you can have 50 things going wrong that could have been solved if people were open and willing to communicate with one another.
Well, it sounds like you guys agree that communication is that thing that can make a project fail easier than everything else. What is something that a municipality could look at and go, oh, this is an early warning sign that something's going to go off the tracks if we don't get that communication right? Is it just not replying to emails, or is there something else?
I mean, I would say it's the finger pointing in a meeting. When people start blaming each other, or when they say their fault, our fault, this is you, this is me, this is your responsibility, this was in your contract, this is not in my contract. I think when the finger pointing starts is when you've already got issues. And I think that's a huge sign, I would say, when the finger pointing has already started, for sure.
Well, you guys talked about it earlier about being invisible, and that is the biggest win, when your intervention, your involvement is not even up front because things just go smoothly. What is the biggest win for a city when you're invisible doing your thing behind the scenes?
But they don't have to worry about the project. It's being taken care of. The needs are being taken care of. The end users are understanding what they're going to be getting, when they're going to be getting something, how much it's going to be costing, ensuring that they're going to be getting the high quality product that they expect, that the citizens expect. It's bond money typically, right? So it's money being invested by your property taxes or different taxes. So it's ultimately the citizens of the city and ensuring they're getting what they want. Because I think, if it doesn't work out like that, it makes the council meetings a lot more difficult when you're having to go in front of the public and explain things. That makes it very difficult. Or you're having to go ask for more money because we're over budget or whatever it may be. And so I think, being that invisible lead, I think is huge, because if we can make the project go successfully, everybody wins. And we're just one big team. We have to be a team. We all have to pat each other on the back when we leave. Great job. Because if we're pointing fingers, if there's arguing, that can cause it's cancerous. It can cause to much, much worse things on a project. And so at the end of the day, we want the highest quality project. We want it within budget. We want it on schedule. Everybody typically walks away happy.
And I'll just add one more thing to that because that's looking at the project schedule, right? We walk away happy, but what about the life cycle of the building afterwards? It's a silent thing, right? But if we're doing our job as an owner's rep through the whole entire process, the building's going to have the longevity that it should have, right? So from a maintenance perspective, it becomes a huge undertaking for a municipality to operate these facilities. And so making sure that the life cycle of the building throughout all of the maintenance for the next 30 to 50 years, if it's a building or a roadway or whatever it is really successful and efficient in its operations.
Yeah, and Kendra, when you look at the financial piece of what you guys do and what cities are managing on these large projects, we recruit a lot of finance directors for cities. And so, that's one of these positions where there's a lot of technical assets needed for the cities to be working on. And often these large projects aren't the only thing that these finance directors are working through on their invoicing and things like that. One thing that I realized in working with the AGCM team was how detailed when you go through the bill and making sure that just the billing is done correctly and how much potential savings can be done in that. Because, you might just get an invoice from a contractor and in general look at it and go, hey, that's probably right. But unless you go line by line through that bill, you don't really know that they're charging you correctly, or you could be overpaying. There could be a lot of things there. So what advice would you give cities whether they bring your services on or not? Like, how important is that billing aspect?
It's incredibly important. We all want to believe that everybody is going to submit the most accurate information. And I truly think that everybody attempts to, but things fall through the cracks. Some of these projects, especially the big ones or the complex remodels, the payment applications, the invoices can be incredibly painstakingly long. And so mistakes are bound to happen. And the advice I would truly give is to have somebody dedicated. If it's an owner's rep, that's fantastic. If it's internal to your municipality, have someone dedicated to really looking at it. Lean on your design team to review it and walk it with them. Make sure these things are happening because when overbillings happen in advance of the work actually happening, you can run into some real problems towards the end of a project and during audits, right? Typically, these projects are on par for auditing at some point in time, right? Public funding especially. So making sure that the percentage of completion aligns with what is being billed and also that the proper documentation in those invoices is being submitted. Because during that procurement process and the contracting process, there's going to typically be a laundry list of documents and backup associated with your invoices that you receive. So making sure that all of those things, all of the boxes are checked and that they're accurate makes a difference.
I mean, it's really easy just to get an overpayment refunded, right? I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, there's no challenge there at all.
Yeah, I say that facetiously, but it is really true that in a world where so many financial people working for cities are so strapped with all that they're doing in a municipality, from taking care of, water billing, municipal court, all of those things, especially those cities who have even a large population or the small ones who just have limited staff. I think that financial aspect is really something that cities need to lean into more and more to make sure that they're not missing or getting overbilled for things that maybe aren't part of their contract.
I think I want to hear from everybody, including Michael on this one. But sometimes whether you're recruiting or you're managing a multi-million-dollar project, everything goes right. Everything goes smoothly. You become invisible. And at the end of the day, somebody may look around and go, well, why didn't we just do this ourselves? So how do you communicate the value that you've added when it looks like nothing happened?
Great question.
It's like police world, James, you have your officers out there and what is the value of crime not happening? How willing are people to pay for that in public safety when you're looking at a fire department? Hopefully they're not used very often, right? You're putting enormous cost in to make sure that there's preparedness there. But on the same side, like using an agency like AGCM, or just making sure that the risk is mitigated to a point where things don't occur, I think is really what city leaders and city, managers should be thinking about is how do I provide the best valuable asset, whether that's public safety or a building, with the most limited risk.
Yeah. And so to tap onto that, I think two things. One being from our services and deliverables, we do weekly reports, monthly reports. And so it's not just a document to cover our butts or to cover the butts of anybody, but literally we want to document the progress of the project, the goods, the bads, the uglies, right? We're there to deliver the news, whether it's good news or bad news. And I think that's a big piece of our deliverable as well, is to help communicate that to to the staff. And so they understand what the value is that we're bringing. I think that's a big piece to it, for sure.
Yeah, and really, I mean, it's like the $1,000,000 question, right? Because my goal is to make sure that nobody even knows I'm there, that the project's just great at the end of the day. And although that doesn't always happen, that's still the goal, right? So it becomes, how do we become our own cheerleader almost? It's kind of a bizarre thing. And it really is maintaining the documentation through the process and being able to openly share that, not just with your one client contact, but maybe offer to share it in a community setting, in a council setting, whatever that looks like to help them. It also helps an owner's rep be able to demonstrate their engagement in the process as well.
What we've also seen too is a lot of our clients that come to us after the fact, or not even after the fact, but when we're going and introducing ourselves and explaining, 8 out of 10, they've had a bad experience. And so they're going into it, well, hell, it's got to be better than what I've had before, right? And so we get a lot of that too. There's a lot of already been there, done that, and don't want to do it again. That's been beneficial for us too going into those situations.
And I'm sure you get referrals from the people that you've stepped in and helped fix a project. You're probably getting referrals to other cities and school districts from there.
Yeah, it's some of the best client relations, some of the best business development. It is getting those client referrals, as well as the good reviews or good client feedback that we can utilize to share with other clients, for sure.
Kendra, I'll start with you. What would you say is the cost of not having project management on a complex municipal initiative?
The cost of not having an owner's rep is really time and attention, right? How much time do you want your already employed staff working on to really focus on a project with multiple stakeholders? You don't just talk about your end users, but the community is a stakeholder. The funding agents are a stakeholder. The end users, of course, the contractor, the design team, the third-party contracts, the finance department, all the departments in the city essentially become a stakeholder in some regard. The focus that has to happen on a complex municipal project to make sure that those are really aligning in their needs and wants and defining that success becomes absolutely critical. And so if you don't have someone or multiple someones really focusing on it, things are going to fall through the crack. A building is going to be designed with pink walls, but everybody wanted purple walls. And then the cost of that change happens. That's a very real example that actually happened on a project of mine once, right at the end of a project. And you just think, wow, how did we get pink walls? I don't know, because it very clearly said purple. And well, it was because of stakeholder coordination, right? And really defining who makes the decisions, and then I guess sort of ranking the decisions and bringing it all together into one piece. So your time and attention is really the cost of not having an owner's rep. And that results in change and potentially schedule impact as well at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective is without having an owner's rep is there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk in the cost. There's a lot of risk in the financial piece of it, a lot of risk in the schedule that Kendra talked about, a lot of risk in accountability. Like I talked about earlier, is you've got to be accountable for the services that you're providing. And if you're not accountable for that could be huge. So I think us not being there, to me, there's an immense amount of risk on that project that can happen, big or small. It doesn't really matter in the size. We've come to realize, yes, there's complexities in a small project and a large project, but from the administrative side, the risks, the schedules, the costs, it's all the same. Every project has it. So it's knowing where and when for us to jump in at the most, successful time is big thing. So to me I would say the risk is being there. There's a lot of risk if an owner's rep is not involved.
Michael, have you seen, not to scare anybody, but have you seen instances where somebody may lose their job, whether they get fired, or probably more likely they just lose support in council, whether that be the city manager or the finance director or somebody else that was overseeing the project and may not have been equipped to do that?
Yeah, I think that, certainly there's an accountability level for municipal employees, but certainly, if you've got, for instance, a public works director who doesn't necessarily have the bandwidth or knowledge to supervise a project, and then you're asking them to lead a project and or really, take it through the entire process from design through construction. And when something goes wrong, if you haven't trained them properly, I think it's really hard to hold those employees to the appropriate level of accountability. Mostly it's going to fall on those higher level leaders and those managers where they're investing an enormous amount of energy and time into building trust with their community and building trust with their elected board. And when projects go awry and they're not meeting expectations, essentially you're taking the trust hits with that. And I think, it may be something that's survivable and explainable, but really, if you haven't taken every measure that you possibly can to, make the right steps happen, to get the right people involved, to get properly trained people involved, then that's the risk that you're willing to take, right? And so that's where we do see some people get terminated from their positions. And I think, we've seen some of that in Texas. There's been some city managers let go because large projects have went, terribly wrong, or there's been a lot of money that the city has invested that has either been lost or the project wasn't completed. And so really it's an investment on the leader's part to understand what's the best process that I can do that's going to increase that trust level with the community and the people that I represent.
It's definitely worth the time for a city manager to pick up the phone and talk to one or more owners' reps and at least see what that might cost and see what they can do for them.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is you need to be really careful with, and whether it's AGCM or another owner's rep firm, is you have to understand what's your level of trust. How can I get a firm in here? And just like Marty talked about, they want to be a trusted partner. That ultimately comes with relationships and the true communication there. But really, when you're getting out there, you have to evaluate and make sure you're doing what's best for your community in the long run.
And Marty, AGCM doesn't exist in this space by themselves. You've got competitors out there. Can you tell us what separates a good owner's representative from a great one?
Yeah, we do have a lot of competitors, especially in the state of Texas. After coming out of COVID, Texas is a booming state. And so it's brought in a lot of competitors. And at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, I think it has a lot to do with relationships. We're in a relationship building industry. It's all about people. It's about trust. It's about being accountable for what you say and what you're going to do. And that's what builds the relationships. A difference between us not being a contractor, we can't just submit on a bid and because we're low bid, we're going to get that project. We have to start our relationship building sometimes a year, 2 years in advance to start building that relationship. And so I think, the difference is on what's good to great owners rep firms is you do what you say you're going to do. The integrity that you bring to the project, the integrity that you bring to the communities, I think is huge. The reps firms that are extremely good is what are accountable for what they say and what they do. If they mess up, they're going to fix it. They're not just going to walk away. They're not just going to point fingers, right? I think the great firms take accountability for their work. So it really has a lot to do with the leadership, their integrity, and what they say and what they do, and then their commitment and the accountability that they bring to the projects. That's kind of what is the difference between a good and a great owner's rep firm.
Kendra, do you have anything to add what may set AGCM apart from maybe some of the competitors?
I absolutely do. I was hoping you would ask. I truly think it's our people. That's our one resource, right? Our deliverable comes from all of our people. And we have a really, really unique blend of architects, contractors, former leaders in the community that all have a really diverse set of experience, estimators, right? Like we have a great blend of people, but it's more than just their technical skills. We really pride ourselves on integrity, like Marty said, but also just bringing a genuine relationship and flavor to each project, each client, right? We're not going to just go hire somebody because on paper they look great. They truly have to be able to engage and earn our trust before we even have them on our professional team. And that's because we have really high expectations and we do help hold our own people accountable. So at a field level and operations level is building the trust and having a genuine person that's combined with all of the technical knowledge that we would need to execute the projects.
Well, Michael, as we're wrapping up here, is there anything that we failed to cover or anything else you have?
No, I just really appreciate being able to collaborate with a firm like AGCM. At Clear Career Professionals, we talk a lot about what our impact is. We are an impact-driven firm, and that's why so many retired government professionals are eager to be a part of our team and really get back out and still be impactful in the knowledge and skill sets that they have. And very similarly, I think we're positioned well with partners like AGCM who really count upon their impact and what they're doing for communities as their most achievable goal. And so I'm really happy to have these folks on, and thanks for the relationship with the folks from AGCM.
Yes, definitely. Kendra, Before we leave today, is there anything that we missed, or would you like to say something to city managers and other city executives that are struggling with all these problems and trying to figure out how to get through the day?
Yeah, most definitely. I think reach out to an owner's rep if you don't have one. And if you have one, reach out to them. And if you're not satisfied, there's nothing holding you back from reaching out to get some outside advice, right? Somebody like Mike, who has experience on both sides of the fence, is a valuable resource. But picking up the phone or dialing into LinkedIn to connect with somebody, I find that at least at AGCM, we're willing to give guidance, whether or not you're our client, right? So a different perspective, I think, is sometimes needed, especially if you're struggling on your own projects at the municipal level or not. And so just don't be shy, right? We're always willing to offer direction and guidance or provide resources as needed, right? We want to educate as much as we want to participate in the projects.
Thank you. Marty, first, can you tell us how people would get in touch with you and find more information about AGCM? And then can you leave our municipal leaders with any words of wisdom?
Sure. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. agcm.com is the website. Obviously, there's lots of ways to get a hold of us. By just a Google search, you can find us. The biggest thing for me is, the citizens expect projects just to go right. I think for those projects to go right, you need to hire an owner's rep firm to be able to help it go right. And I think everything that Kendra just said, client or no client, we're here to help. That's our biggest value, is just here to help. And again, whether we're a client or no client, or whether we're getting a fee or getting no fee, if you've got questions, comments, concerns through LinkedIn, through email, through our website, just ask questions. We'll get back to you and we'll answer it. We'll help you. We'll guide you. If we don't have the answer, we'll help go figure that out. So just ultimately just want to be a trusted advisor and be a resource for you, regardless if you're a client or not.
Marty and Kendra, I really appreciate you guys coming on and giving us a little information, especially about something that has a lot of liability attached to it, and obviously the potential solution for solving some of that risk. Michael, thanks for being on as always. To our listeners, thank you for what you do in your communities day in and day out. Please follow Clear Career Professionals on LinkedIn. Check out our website for the many career opportunities that we have up there. Please follow and like the Clear Voice on your favorite podcast platform, and we will catch you next time.